Welcome back to Preparing for the Unexpected. Today we are talking with CEO and CISO and founder at Cyber Risk Opportunities, Kip Boyle. Kip, great first segment that we talked about there. In this one, I'd like to talk about the compressed recovery timelines as our overall topic, cyber resilience versus traditional DRMBC. So let's talk about compressed recovery timelines. Um, DR and BC, we often work in days and sometimes hours, but cyber is a little bit different.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Um, so I think cyber really compresses to minutes. And so there's a lot of implications to that. So for example, your most of your recovery decisions, because you have to move so fast, really should be pre-authorized as much as possible. So that means a lot of conversations about scenarios, right? Well, what happens if this scenario occurs or that scenario occurs? And you have to be really cognizant of um, your RTOs and RPOs, right? So that you have to understand, like, how long can a system be down before we have genuine business crisis versus just business inconvenience? And then, and then recovery point objective. How much data can we afford to lose, right? You really need to know those things in advance, because if you need three approvals to restore from a backup and your window is 15 minutes, you're never going to make it. Like, you're just it's built-in failure, right? So you need playbooks that will include who can make decisions without doing escalations. And interestingly enough, Alex, that is not a technology problem. That's a governance issue.
How so?
Well, because we're talking about not what can the technology do. We're talking about give me some canned decisions that, as the cyber resilience leader who's trying to handle an incident, give me some canned decisions that I can rely on. That has nothing to do with technology. It has everything to do with me planning in advance, right? And that's really the governance function. What are the guardrails? What do I have to stay within as I attempt to deal with this cyber, problem that is calling on us to be as resilient as we can?
Yeah, because it's not business as usual. You're not operating as such.
No,
So your
no, not at
regular
all.
escalation paths or decision frameworks may not be applicable, especially because we talked about from moving from hours and days to
Yes.
minutes. We really have to change and look at our delegation of authority under these trying times.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, in normal times, you have, protocols, and those protocols are in there for a reason, right? There's spending limits, or, how much planned downtime can you have in a given, year or quarter or something like that. But when you move into a cyber crisis where you've got to be as resilient as possible, you don't have time for that. You're just that's not going to make any sense. And so you've got to agree going into it that you're going to dispense with that formality so that you can deal with the crisis.
Yeah, and to make those changes, maybe that's when you go through the different levels of approval beforehand to say that,
Exactly.
okay, yeah, based on what's going on, Kip is authorizing Alex to make certain decisions up to a
That's
point.
correct. That's correct. And you're not going to try to interfere in the moment. You're going to let your incident commander, do what they think needs to be done within those guardrails that you've given them.
Yeah, and you can, I guess, it's like goalposts. You move the goalposts a little bit, make them a little wider type thing. So,
Yeah, make them a little wider, possibly make them a little more narrow. I don't know. I mean, it's going to depend a lot on the situation, the system that's being impacted, and so on and so forth. And the last time you want to be trying to figure out your guardrails is when there's adrenaline coursing through your body, the cortisol is spiking. That is not the time to govern. That is the time
yeah,
for action.
yeah, and the phone is going off. You've got leadership calling you, or
That's right.
depending on the event, it's
Yeah.
media
And
if they've got a
and
hold
one
of
of
the
the
number.
things that's often overlooked is communication. I'm so busy trying to manage the situation, which is really, that's what I do as an incident commander. But I've got to communicate. I have to tell stakeholders what's going on. It's very human when I know something bad's happened, but I don't know what it is because nobody's communicating with me, I'm going to fill in the blank with the worst possible interpretation of what's happening. And you don't want that. As an incident commander, you do not want that because then you're going to start getting even more pressure. People are going to be like, Kip, you need to tell me what's going on right now. No, I have to do this right now. So another piece of this that's really important is you need to have a designated communicator, a scribe slash communicator, somebody whose singular focus is to keep that line of communication open so your stakeholders don't freak out on you.
And that person who's doing the scribing are they the ones who would be going around to all these different groups to get an update, or
Yeah.
they just getting the update as it comes from the incident leader?
Well, that's going to be organizational. I think the context of the organization is going to determine that. If you're a giant organization, like a Boeing or a Microsoft or, whatever, your solution is probably going to look very, very sophisticated and more people involved than it would be if you're like a, $50 million a year manufacturer, right? You don't have that scale. And so maybe you can do it with less people.
So how do you align those two then? The days down to minutes and the demand for information going up. It's like time demand goes down and
Right.
the request for
Right.
information goes up. So how do you
Yeah.
bring those
Yeah.
together?
Well, I think it's planning. All right. Again, what have you done before you have to show everybody how cyber resilient you are to be able to do all that stuff, right? So, like, I suggest to people like you don't need to have somebody who's the designated scribe communicator wear that title all the time. Maybe that's an additional duty that only erupts when something awful happens. But I hope you've had a chance to like role play, do some kind of a tabletop exercise with this person involved. Otherwise, they're going to come at it cold. The last time they thought about it was 9 months ago, maybe a year. They don't know what they're doing, right? They're going to pick it back up as fast as they can. But practice, practice, practice. I'm going to throw out a quote that I really enjoy. This is old, an oldie but a goodie, but General Eisenhower, right? He said to the effect, plans are useless. Planning is everything. And I think that's true.
Yeah, but I've got a project management background as well, and they say the more you do in planning, the better your execution is going to be.
That's right. Even if you don't follow the plan, even if you deviate from the plan, you're going to have this muscle memory. You're going to have this focus, this awareness, you're just ready to go.
So I want to ask you about something. How do you, in a cyber event with business continuity, disaster recovery, and everybody else is up and running, how do you respond to a cyber event who have their processes to do when you've got IT trying to bring up systems and look into what they're doing and helping cyber at the
Yeah.
same time? What takes precedence? Or not, maybe that's too much of a question, but
Well,
how do you manage those two competing
yeah.
things?
Well, I'm just gonna. You keep setting me up to quote Eisenhower over and over and over again, right? You don't figure out how to coordinate in the moment, right? That adrenaline, that cortisol, it's not, we're not set up as human beings to, have that kind of, get along with everybody when we're in that moment. So that means you've got to sort that out ahead of time, and you've got to do not just the planning, but you've got to test. You have to practice working together. And if you only do it once a year, okay, I'll accept that, as opposed to never doing it. But depending on the criticality of your operations and the overall risk load, once a year may not be enough. It may need to be twice a year or 4 times a year, something like that. Now, another thing I want to offer too is that instinctually, everybody wants to get everything back online as fast as possible and right away. However, in a cyber situation where you've been attacked, that is a very risky thing to do. It feels like the right thing to do, but here's the thing, if you restore a system from a compromised backup, you're just going to reinfect yourself. And it's just going to compound the difficulties, not just the practical difficulties, but the psychological difficulties. People are going to be really demotivated by that. They're going to get paranoid. They're not going to know what to trust or who to trust, and it's just going to make the whole situation so much worse. So when I'm working with customers, what I tell them is, okay, fast is good, but verified is better. How do you know that you're restoring from good, known good backups? And so what I recommend is that you build a clean recovery checkpoint in your process, even if it takes a little bit of extra time. This is just one of the risks that's inherent in a cyber attack, and you really got to pay attention to it.
Yeah, I think if there was a cyber attack where I was working, I would want to make sure before I touched anything that what I was touching was okay, like all the data. I'm not going to suddenly make things worse by accessing a corrupt database or some.
See, there you go, thinking without the benefit of adrenaline and cortisol coursing through your veins. You've just said something that's really very wise, but I rarely see people in this sort of, contemplative state of mind in the middle of a cyber crisis. They're not thinking like that. They're like, this hurts. I want to get out of this as fast as possible. What's the shortest path? And they kind of go running and stumbling sometimes if they don't have that plan and that muscle memory.
And then potentially make things even worse, like you said.
Oh, absolutely.
So, so,
Yeah.
so
I mean,
go ahead.
and you don't know. You don't know if you're going to make it worse or not. That's the risk, right?
Yeah. Sometimes ripping off the Band-Aid quickly isn't the right way to go.
Not if it pulls your sutures out and you bleed out. No.
Exactly. See? On that note, we've come to the end of our second segment. We're talking with Kip Boyle from, excuse me, Cyber Risk Opportunities, and we will be right back.